Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor at USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Yeah. Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being with us. In class today, we broadcast 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. through 11 a.m. Central Time. John is engineering the broadcast at GCN in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli. If you'd like to call us, we'll pay for the call, 866-582-9933. Telephone listen line is up, 605-477-3249. Captain John Ragan's with us. Welcome, Captain John Ragan.
Good morning, Vincent.
Hey! Actually, I'm going to be doing hey again right after the broadcast. John, I wanted to mention that to our class very quickly, some housekeeping. So, USA Prepares, if you decide that you have some feelings as to what you like, don't like, or you think we can improve on, give us a call during the entire week. That's on topic during the week. Make it succinct. And we, let's see. Which instructor do you think was banned from Walmart? If you've got a feeling about that, please let us know. One of us was banned from going back to Walmart, and I'll let you know, in a few days, maybe next week, which one it was. I'd like to hear a little bit more about who you think that might be. And I mentioned that Robert in Kansas was suggested on the air that we not move from Missouri, and taking that seriously. So in order to do that, I'd like to have some more of you around us. So we're thinking, okay, we'll just get a property and sell an acre or two to those who are interested, and you can put a container on it. You can build a house on it. We'll have like a village center where we can meet and do things and learn things and set up shop, woodworking, but you got to have skills. Okay, you can't just you can't be a millennial with pink or blue hair or tattooed and expect that you'll be welcome, because that's not the case. You actually have to have skills and be able to contribute to the village. And I mean with skills. That's the important thing. And you have to have your own firearms and ammo. Don't come here and say, I don't know anything about that stuff. You really have to know what you're doing before you get here to be welcomed into the village. So it would be like a club, okay? And we can discriminate against anybody we want for whatever reason we want. And the reasons would be, if you don't know how to do anything, we're certainly not interested in playing with you, seriously. So you have to have skills: gardening, roofing, framing, metalwork, welding, automotive, teaching, okay, all kinds of things. And we want to help ourselves. So if you know how to do things, we're interested. If you don't know how to do anything, we're not interested. And it's like the Chinese factory tool outlet I went to within the last few days, and I went to return something that we did not need, an unopened item and a defective item. And I said to the cashier, am I the only one in the store who's not tattooed? And one of the gals, one of the upper management types, if you've seen The Stand, Stephen King's The Stand, there was a character by the name of Nadine. She was evil looking. Well, she had tan colored hair, not blonde, not white, not brown, tan, an unnatural tan. What a really weird looking color. And one of the gals there had that. I mentioned that to my son. He said, well, that's a status symbol. That's a fad. Really, that's pretty gross. And it went really well with all the tattoos up and down her body. Anyway, that's all I have. So, Captain John, you've got a lot to say, and you're going to wipe that smile right off our face. I know you are, because I know what you're going to be talking about.
I've got 8 items lined up for today. If you want to follow along, it's at thefinancialstateoftheunion.com. Just want to make a comment on where to live. Like I say, it's my opinion. Get out of the United States while you can. I believe there's going to be a point where you will not be able to go, and be even more trouble trying to get some money out of the United States, where you have a little bit more control over it. Even now, all the government has to do is say that you owe the IRS $50,000 or more, and your passport is suspended. It doesn't matter if you owe that much or not. They just have to accuse you of it. Now, if you don't owe that much, I don't know how long it will take to fix that, but if time is of the essence, it could get interesting. The other point on that is it's not going to be long, probably pretty early next decade, that any place that you are allowed to live in the United States, and this gets back to the Agenda 2030, Agenda 21 stuff, where there's parts of the United States where people will not be allowed to live. Any of the places that you will be allowed to live will be subjected to 5G. And if you want to live in that radiation, be my guest. That's one of the reasons I'm looking at getting out to a poor country. Eventually 5G will be everywhere, but the longer I can put that off, I think the better off I'm going to be. Okay. This may really upset a lot of people, especially here in Texas, where football is the state religion. Time to end football. If you've been following the news for the last few years, there's been quite a few articles come out about how concussions can lead to CTE, which is a severe brain condition. And you're probably noticing there's more and more professional football players that are retiring, earlier than than people did in the past. And a lot of us, they just want to get out of football while they still have some health left. Well, this study, which, if you want to argue with the universities that participated in this, be my guest. But what the headline says is stop focusing on concussions. Any head hits to football players can severely damage the brain and lead to CTE, whether they are concussed or not. And I looked up how many high schoolers are playing football. That's just over 1 million. I don't know how many in earlier grades. There's less in college, and even less in professional football. But it's just time to make these sports illegal. I mean, they were fun, but we didn't know how much damage we were causing people. And this isn't just football. A lot of other sports, you end up getting hits to the head. Soccer, baseball, basketball, hockey. And you can't make this safe with more padding or another helmet. It all boils down to physics, and if you remember inertia, this is one of the reasons that cars have seat belts, is that when you have a sudden stop, things that aren't connected keep on going. So, with the car, that seatbelt will keep you in the seat. if you had that, sudden hit into another vehicle or a tree and didn't have a seatbelt on, you would continue to go through the windshield. Or if you were in the driver's seat, be impaled on the steering wheel column. Well, it's the same with the brain. When you have a sudden stop, whether it's another player or the ground, your brain keeps on going and will hit the inside of your skull. And especially for people that are Christians, I find this disturbing. If you want to continue supporting this, why would you want to brain damage your children for fun? And why would you support people destroying their health for your entertainment? Vincent?
Well, Captain John, it's even worse than that, because I've been in the bleachers at karate tournaments with young people. I'm talking about 12, 13, 14-year-old children in competition. And I've seen these sick parents calling for blood. They want their little warrior to make the opponent bleed. And I'm talking about 12, 13, 14-year-old contestants. It's absolutely sick. And, they'll yell from the stands for their little monster to extract blood. It's supposed to be skill. It's supposed to be art. It's supposed to be self-protection. But no, these parents are sick. So you're absolutely right. And I would never let my child play football how can you not think? How can you not think that you're going to damage someone's body or your own? How is that possible? That where the object of the game is to run and tackle and hit. I mean, that's what they do. And if just look at the history of these guys that play, they're all banged up. And how many people do you know who are, 35, 40 years old or older, who'll say, oh yeah, the reason that I limp, it's that old football injury. Right? Happens a lot. It's craziness, and I'm with you. And the school systems, what are they thinking? And what's really important to the school system? Oh, it's not chemistry. It's not history. It's not astronomy. It's not shop. It's football. It's baseball. It's sports. That's what's important. And who are the highest paid at the university level? Well, those would be the football coaches, right? They dwarf in compensation what brilliant professors make. And all they're doing is teaching people to hurt themselves, hurt others, and chase a ball. But it's big business. It fills those 65,000 seats. I don't get it. I have no desire, none, to watch guys in short pants beat up each other or chase a ball. Because when it's all over, my wallet would be lighter, I would have learned nothing, and I would have wasted time that I could never get back. Captain John Ragan, I'm with you. And I just want to mention, I am not, and I did not say, turn Iran into glass yesterday. I'm not in favor of nuking anybody. We'll be right back. Captain John Ragan's with us, thefinancialstateoftheunion.com. Steve Elkins is calling in from Florida. Welcome, Steve.
Hey there. Long-time listener, second-time caller. No, what John was talking about, the injury, we're talking contra coup injury, and I've seen a lot of that in the ICU, the brain injuries. And I agree with him. The football probably should be phased out. Will it? I don't think so. I think the greed factor is too much. I don't think it's ever going to happen. But, let's add to that list of getting rid of football because of the injury to the brain. But boxing. Now, the whole intention of boxing is knocking the guy's head off. And I actually had the opportunity to meet and greet Muhammad Ali in his last days while he was doing a movie promotion for When We Were Kings back in Salt Lake City, Utah. And clearly the Parkinson's that he had, which was really debilitating towards the very end there, really, really noticeable, was all secondary because of the boxing history he had, the fighting history. And I would include that also. Get rid of the boxing. These are sports that bring brain injury, and it's just a matter of time. Especially boxing. I mean, how many boxers have we lost this last year? Quite a few. Quite a few deaths in boxing. So I don't know. I would phase both those out. Just get them out completely.
And in karate, that I was talking about before, young people under 18 are not allowed to hit to the head. And yet I saw hit after hit after hit to the head. And the parents love it. Parents love it when their children exercise what the parents taught them about how to violate the rules. It's sick. Captain John, your thoughts?
Yeah, you stole one of my points. I was going to bring up Muhammad Ali and how sad that was to watch his decline. And just to try and wrap up this if I can,
Sure.
It's another indicator that we're following the decline of the Roman Empire, with the gladiators. And I was just reading this morning, there were 2 high school football players that died during games Friday night, one in Oklahoma, one in West Virginia. And I also pulled up an article that was on MSN. Looks like it originally was from USA Today. The salaries of the top 25 college football coaches, number 25 was a tad under $4 million a year. By the time you get up to number 1, it's $8.7 million. And you wonder why they're having to charge so much for the supposedly academic part of college. This is part of the problem.
Steve Elkins, any comments?
No, I agree 100%. Yeah, we don't need these sports teams. Actually, the college ranks of basically they're semi-pro is what they are. They're just a feeder system to the pros. And if we're really serious about higher education, then we need to get rid of all these other things. But again, we're talking about the greed factor. Look how much college football generates, college basketball generates. It's all about the money. I've always said that it is always about the money until we get that, eliminate the greed factor. Kids are going to be paying more for school. And actually, I'm not sure, to be honest, selling higher education in the future is going to be really difficult to do because I see so many kids that are getting out of school with a degree and unable to use that degree, and they're waiting tables or doing this and that. I'm thinking, what'd you get your degree in? I got it in this. I'm thinking, why aren't you doing it? Well, because there's no jobs. So selling higher education is going to be very difficult in the future because there's a very, very small window of opportunity of actually getting out and getting a degree and getting your job in your degree. And, of course, they're being saddled with, $70,000 or maybe $100,000 in school debt, which cannot be waived off, cannot be written off. Unless you vote for Elizabeth Warren, then she'll probably waive it for you. But other than that, it's a debt that stays with you and carries with you. The immediate gratification, delayed gratification, you go to college, you get debt, and then you can't get your job, and you're saddled with the debt forever, and you can't move out of mom and dad's basement, and you can't get on with your life. Selling higher education is going to be very difficult in the future.
Yeah, and seems that the universities are a great training camp for homosexuality. As a matter of fact, there's a college or university in California that says that pedophilia is a sexual designation. You can be male, female, or pedophile. Steve, thanks so much. I've got to run. We've got David in Illinois on hold. Thank you for calling in. Captain John Ragan's with us. David in Illinois, welcome.
How you doing? I would like to comment on some of this martial arts. I used to go to the tournaments in Missouri as well, and I have special headgear, macho gear with face protection over them. Now, when I was there, I seen a parent at the last tournament I stopped going to. This kid broke a kid's nose, and the father's right there saying, "Don't worry about it. You lost a point, but you won the match." And I couldn't believe that people were just encouraging these kids, and by the time I'm walking around, they're wanting to borrow my face gear. And I competed against a couple of military guys, one from the Marines and one from the Air Force. And these guys were bad. The Marine guy couldn't beat me, so he tackled me. And I found out afterwards that they were from the military, and I'm like, if that's all you guys can do, we're not getting our tax dollars worth. You know, I mean, I was shocked. But so I agree with you about the tournaments.
So you saw firsthand exactly what I was describing.
Oh, yeah. I had people wanting to borrow. A lady said she brought her kid there for the first time. She said, can I use that thing? I spent thousands of dollars on my kid's teeth, and I don't want them knocked out here. I mean, it was sad, you know.
Mm-hmm. And it's the parents. It's the parents. Yeah. The children, I think, really want to behave, and I think they really want to follow the rules because that's what their instructors, their senseis, you know, were telling them. Follow the rules, behave, and here's what's allowed, here's what's not allowed, don't do these things. But then the parents, I think, egg the children on, and it's awful. And then, and these are the same parents that neglect their children at home. I really appreciate that. David, anything else you want to say? John Ragan's got a lot on his list.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt his motivation. But anyway, now one other thing about these sports. I don't go to these sports. I only went to a sports tournament activity once as far as professional football, baseball. But it's going to be hard to stop something like that because not just that violence. They sell so much beer and alcohol. If they really wanted to stop, you don't see the cops sitting out there pulling these people over for DUIs because that would cut into the funding they're making for the cities where them places are held. They don't do that at all because once they get in there, those people start drinking and they act like fools, you know.
Well, they literally will take D-cell batteries, well, we'll call them batteries, but they're D-cells from flashlights because they're heavy, they're dense, they have a lot of mass, and they will throw them at the players at ball games. And, you know, if you get hit by one of those things, it's like getting hit with a slow-moving shotgun shell. You know, a slug. That's what we're talking about. David, I really appreciate your call.
Thank you. All right.
Yeah, thank you so much. All right, Captain John Ragan, back to you. I know you've got a lot to say.
It's all about energy.
Yeah.
And the reason I put this article up, just scroll down a little bit, the second chart has global primary energy consumption, and it's split up into the various categories, and this goes back to 1800. Traditional biofuels, which would be, you know, wood, dung, things like that, fairly constant. Since 2000, it's risen a little bit. As you look, and it gets kind of interesting when you start thinking about what happened in history at these time frames too. Coal started taking off around the Civil War, and it keeps on going up, and then even at 2000, it spiked up. Then around the turn of the century, 1900, is where oil and gas started picking up. And it's interesting that those two didn't really start taking off until after World War II. You look at 1950, and then those start expanding. And you have to look really close because at the top of the chart, you have hydropower, nuclear, wind, solar, and other renewables. And that's just such a small fraction of all energy consumption. So when you listen to these wonderful people that want to be president of the United States from the party that's having the debates right now, how do you take that little bit and expand it to cover what is commonly called fossil fuels? And really, it's impossible. It's going to take years just to have an even meaningful percentage of the energy. And when you're talking about wind and solar, when there's no wind and it's nighttime, you need to have that energy stored, which means batteries. And lithium, while plentiful, there's some problems in mining enough of that, especially in the time frame. And then on top of that, cobalt is even more limited. And then solar seems to be the renewable of choice. Well, I was reading an article where even if it becomes 4 times more efficient than it is now, there's not enough silver on Earth, including what's not been mined, in order to meet the needs. And then you add on the silliness of electric cars. They are so limited in mileage. It's one thing to have them out in California where the temperature is pretty mild, but if you're in most of the United States, wintertime, it gets to be cold. Running electric heat really will take away from how far you can go. A lot of places, especially here in Texas in the summertime, you got to run that air conditioning, 90, 100-degree days. And then a quick charge takes 20 to 30 minutes, not 5 or 10 minutes like when you go fill up for gasoline. Horrible for long distance. And then on top of that, we've had several days this year in Texas where they've had energy alerts that, don't use energy because we're getting close to what our capacity is, and then we would start having brownouts or blackouts. If you start having millions of cars on the road, where is all that new electricity going to come from? They're not building new power plants. It's just so insane, the whole movement as it is. I'm not saying something doesn't need to be done, but it needs to be done in a thoughtful way that would actually work. And the transition, according to Chris Martenson, would be the natural gas, which would buy us several decades while we're trying to figure this out. But, don't try to mix government and logic. It just doesn't work. Vincent?
Yeah, let me connect the dot there. So, class, we have here at the farm a solar array. It's rough size, 50 feet long by 13 feet high. And so if you were to calculate the square footage, that would be 650 square feet of solar panels. That array will produce on a really nice, bright, full sun day, very, very few clouds, let's say 33 kilowatts of electricity. The average home uses 33 kilowatts of electricity if you're pretty efficient. You're very efficient. We use 33 kilowatts for our whole farm. So we're more than very efficient. I'm just talking about a regular house or an apartment would use about 33 kilowatts a day. 1,000 kilowatts a month. Well, that's when it's sunny. And what I'm trying to say is that if you think you can spray some solar panels, if you will, on the surface of the roof of your car, in your hood, in your trunk, and just drive around and it's going to work, the answer is there's not enough surface area. With 50 by 13, there's not enough solar array to power our farm every day because it's not sunny every day. And that's in the summer. Now in the winter, we don't generate as much solar power. So we need more than that. We need probably 3 times that much to cover the days where it's not so sunny, to store it, which means that we would need way more battery bank. The battery bank we have, each cell weighs about 100 pounds. There's 40 of them. 4,000 pounds of battery. It's a lot. Now, if you use lead acid batteries, they'd last between 5 and 7 years. How is this really going to work in the long run? It's going to be tough. So then you need a generator to cover those shortfalls, those days when it's rainy, cloudy, snowy, foggy. And where's the fuel for that going to come from? Fuel just went up about 10%, since the attack. And please, make no mistake about it. I am not for turning Iran into glass. I am not. I've never said that. Some people have. But nuclear war, we need more radiation. Is that the point? I hardly think so. And Japan is going to do it to us again. At least they say they will. They are going to dump, unless something changes, they're going to dump the radiation that they've stored in liquid form, in tanks, at Fukushima, into the ocean. That'll be the second time they've damaged the environment in a massive way with radioactivity. That will be the second great attack by Japan. The first great attack was in 1941, December 7th. John, back to you.
The good news is, just saw this morning, is Saudi should be back up to full capacity in 2 to 3 weeks. I thought it was going to be months before the evaluation was done. Something else I learned is the United States and NATO have pacts with Saudi. So if Saudi is attacked, we are obligated by treaty to go to war with them against their enemy. And another fun side bit of trivia. A few weeks ago, I was reading an article where they said gasoline would be below $2 a gallon. That was either late this year or early next year. And it looks like that's going to be off the table now.
And John, getting back to your global primary energy consumption chart, class, you can go to thefinancialstateoftheunion.com and you'll see this chart with today's talking points. And you will see that if you look at this chart where you have the biofuels, traditional biofuels, combined with coal, combined with crude oil, combined with natural gas. I put all that together and oil. Put all that together. It looks like about 95% of the energy comes from those sources. And there's no way we're going to overcome that with renewables like wind and solar and hydro. It's just not going to happen. John's right. Captain John Ragan's with us. John, just below one of the charts on howtosave-the-world.ca that you've been talking about, there are about 7 items highlighted in red. The first one says the economy is built on faith in perpetual growth. Do you want to talk about those 5, 6, 7? Yeah, 7 items in red. I think they're absolutely critical.
I'd like to. Let's hold that, and if there's time at the end of the show, let's hit it then.
Sure. Okay.
Okay. Want to get in collateral damage and mind reading, so we got the second half or the second hour. Collateral damage is a story about how payroll company My Payroll HR closed without warning, and they served 4,000 companies, so thousands of employees didn't get their $26 million worth of paychecks. And the point here is, I don't know how much of this problem is because of the financial situation and how much is criminal, but the point being is there's lots of companies out there that have outsourced major functions of their, in-house operations, what used to be. And as this financial situation starts imploding on us, there's going to be more and more problems occur simply because functions like this will unexpectedly fall away and cause all kinds of problems. We've seen where suppliers have gone out of business before, which has caused problems with manufacturers. This can affect any business because these are functions that businesses used to do themselves. The other one I'm mind reading. And
John, can we go back to My Payroll HR for just a minute or so?
Sure.
Okay, so we have a company that it's one of these cloud type things These guys had 2 little office suites in a nice building in New York State, right? Clifton Park, New York. These guys, it seemed like they were a big company. There were just 2 little office suites in a building, on a floor in a building. And they had access to bank accounts, and the bank account money for payroll would be transferred to them. And they would then transfer to the employees. However, they kept the money, and then the employees' money was transferred back to my payroll HR. So they double dipped, stole money from the company paying the employees, and stole money back from the employees. Is that right? That's how I read this.
Well, they got the money from the companies. Supposedly, they were depositing and then withdrew it. There's still a lot of this situation that we don't know about yet, but it's ugly no matter what.
Yeah, and the bottom line is what John Ragan just said. He talked about we've outsourced things that we used to do. To me, it seems beyond stupid to outsource payroll when you can do that yourself in your company. It seems beyond stupid to outsource doing your own taxes. It seems beyond stupid to put your data that the corporate jewels of your organization or of your sole proprietorship in the cloud. That seems crazy to me. I would never do that. That's like more crazy, more stupid than putting your gun in a safety deposit box. Kyle in Montana, welcome. You're on with Captain John Ragan.
Good morning, Vince. Hey, John must be somewhere close to over the target. Because both of your call-in lines, the 477 number and the other one, that's the regular other 605 number, both went dead at the same time. Just said this is currently offline, shut down everything.
That's too bad. That's too bad. Kyle, a quick question for you. Do you have any thoughts on who the instructor was that was banned from Walmart? I'm just taking a tally here.
Banned from Walmart. My first guess always is you, Vince.
Well, I mean, it may not be me. It could be somebody else. So seriously, I'm taking notes. Who's voting and who they're voting for. One of us literally was banned from Walmart by the store manager.
Wow, and if it wasn't you, and was it in Missouri?
Well, it was in the United States. One of us was banned.
Okay. Well, you're still my number one choice, I think.
Okay. Do you have a number 2 choice?
Steve Elkins, maybe.
Okay. I will write that down. I've got it. And, in about a week or so, I'll let you know, class, who it was. Yeah, true. Anything else, Kyle?
No, that's good. That's fine. Thanks.
Great. Hey, thanks so much for calling in. That's Kyle in Montana, USA Prepares Instructor. Captain John Ragan and I will be right back after these few short commercial announcements. Maybe the telephone listen line will be up and running. But, class, don't trust people you don't know. You don't even know where to go and visit them and knock on their door and say, hey, what are you doing? If you don't know where they are, don't use them. This cloud stuff is crazy to me. I'm not interested in doing anything in the cloud. None of my data is stored on a cloud. As a matter of fact, I have a Rolodex. Everyone all set? Cocked, locked, hour number 2 of USA Prepares. I was asked a question. How do I feel about staying on the air? I was seriously considering throwing it overboard a while back, and we stuck with it. And I'm glad. And maybe we can build this village where, so many of you are interested in seeing your instructors again at a meetup kind of an event. Well, I don't know if that's possible, but or a convention or an expo. Really, that's what you want, an expo. Well, maybe we'll have to do it a different way. Maybe we'll have to all buy in, pick up an acre and of a large tract and own it, and then have, Plan B, location, or actually live on it if you want, and build a village and have us there. That might be the ideal setup, where we actually get to spend a lot more time with faculty of USA Prepare. So if you're interested, you'll have to figure out how to contact me. I'm not going to make it easy. So for those of you who want, you might have to call GCN and say during the broadcast and say, give Vinny my number, please, and I can call you back. But I'm not going to make it easy, because if it's too easy, how do we know that you're serious about it? Okay, Captain John Ragan's with us. Captain John Ragan, please continue.
I'm going to try to get through these next three pretty quick. The mind reading, trust us, and the oath. This article, mind reading AI, could mean the end of humanity. And I'm scrolled about halfway down into the article, and I apologize that the reference for this comes out of Eastern Europe, and I'm not even going to try the name of the university or the name of the researcher. It's Slovenia, which is south of Austria, north of Croatia, just so you got an idea of where it is. And the senior researcher at the Institute for Sociology and Philosophy at the university there is quoted as saying, "What I am studying now is the so-called phenomena of wired brains, a possibility that our brains being connected with strong digital machines. And that is not a utopia. In the Media Lab at MIT, Massachusetts, they already have simple machines like that. It is like a helmet, nothing intrusive. They put it on your head, and then something horrible happens. I saw the video. You think certain thoughts, you do not have to say anything, and the machine reproduces them either in writing or with an artificial voice." And if that doesn't disturb you, I don't know what will. And right now it takes a helmet. I can envision some point in the future they'll figure out a way where they can just monitor your brain waves from a distance. And I'm not sure I want to live in those times, Vincent.
Almost 40 years ago, Bert Bertonis and I crafted a hoax, and it was an April Fool's joke. And we published a press release saying that we invented that technology. Except we didn't say you just put a helmet on. We said that you would have an implant in your arm, and you would be wired to the communications equipment, and it would control what your thoughts were. Meaning, if you wanted to watch a movie, you would actually be in the movie. And we literally sent that out. New York Times, Popular Science, Popular Mechanics, Ebony, a whole bunch of magazines. It got published, and people thought it was real. And we were just having an April Fool's, moment. And people were throwing money at us. They wanted to buy stock because they thought we invented the equivalent of anti-gravity. And of course, we didn't. I was the chief financial officer. We didn't accept any of that. But so that was 39 years ago, almost 40 years ago that we did that. 1980, April 1, 1980. So we had been thinking that that was a possibility, and we were just young guys back then. But it's pretty frightening. I don't like it. I don't like where technology is taking us. It's taking us, Art Bell called it the quickening. That was his term, meaning we're going faster and faster every day. So we're going faster today than we were going yesterday. We're accelerating at an accelerating rate. It's disturbing and terrifying. George in New Hampshire, welcome. You're on with Captain John Ragan.
Hi, Vincent. Hi, John.
Hey.
I got a question, Ben. Is it a prerequisite that you have to be barred from Walmart to be able to join the community in Missouri?
Well, I'm sure you have a mental picture of what we may be like in Walmart, acting confused. And just like I was at the Chinese tool outlet, Harbor Freight, and I asked the gal, I was really confused because it looked like I missed out. I thought it was a prerequisite to be tattooed to be in there. And, boy, I'll tell you what, I saw flip-flops everywhere. I was in the big city. It was disgusting. I was at Sam's Club picking up one item, and it was painful because I was using the self-checkout. And there was a girl supervising the self-checkout at Sam's Club. And she had Kool-Aid orange hair. Now, I've seen the red, I've seen the blue, and I've seen the green. But that was the first time. Now, this gal was a middle-aged gal. What are they trying to say? Now, she and the blue hairs and the pink hairs and the green hairs, they're not welcome. They really aren't. And if you're right. You're right, George. If you look around, the behavior of these people is reckless. I mean, they're not prepared. They're not prepared for anything.
If I may say, I self-bought myself from Walmart a few months ago because I saw a sign when I was leaving the establishment. And usually most Walmarts only have two ways out. And what happened was I saw a sign that, they had this couple, young couple, young man, young woman, both with glasses. They looked vaguely from India, vaguely Hispanic, vaguely American, vaguely Arabic, but they just picked them very well. But it had a banner over it that said True Religion. And then I looked down, and you know what is an ad for? It was an ad for dungarees. And I went out with the bags I had, and I said, should I say something or should I let it go? So I said, no, I'll say something. So I went and I asked for the manager, and I showed it to you could see the young people at the service desk were curious. What do they want to see the manager about? So I showed them the sign. They agreed with me. I said, that's disrespectful to people of faith. And I said, I find it offensive. So the managers came up. They were moving kind of slow, and they were young people, but let's just say they were in no hurry. So anyway, they came up to me. I showed them the sign, and I said, look, I know people who work here. I've never made a complaint here. I said, but this is something that I just couldn't ignore. So they both took out phones, and it looked like they were going to do something about it. They agreed with me. So I talked to a few people in the community, and I went back a few days later, and long story short, they hadn't taken it down. So I said, okay, that's the way you feel, well, you don't need my business. Well, I went back in after 2 months, and lo and behold, somebody had put this stand with some articles on it blocking 99% of the sign. So I guess they got enough. No small part, I think, because I spread the word, too. I said, this is disrespectful. But I just wanted to say, so like I said, I self-bod, so I kind of like very occasionally now I might go back in. But I feel clean that I've disassociated with them as much as I have.
Good for you. And when I was in Sam's Club yesterday, I went to the customer service department, and I asked about what do they need from me to be tax exempt on certain purchases, because I refuse to pay sales tax on items that I'm using for the farm. I don't have to. So I want to exempt, and I'll choose which items are for the farm, and I can prove it. So that's not a big deal. When we get audited, it's no big deal. Well, the customer service manager was there, and she looked over. She was waiting on someone else. She looked over, and she said, your name again is? And I said, Vin Finella. She said, yeah. I said, you know me? She said, everybody knows you. And she said, everybody in this store knows who you are. She just couldn't remember my name. And that's because I raised such a fuss about those reading glasses that I was buying that I didn't like the way I was treated. And so I talked to the store manager, the assistant manager, and corporate headquarters, and everybody knows who I am. And I don't know if they're afraid of me, or they despise me, or what it is, or maybe they respect me, but I'm not sure what it is. But she said, yeah, everybody knows who you are in the store, meaning the employees. So who's your vote for the one who was kicked out? Now I'm not running for the number one position. I'm not campaigning to be the guy that was thrown out. It could have been any one of us. Seriously. So George,
I'd say maybe I want to say Rick Sheehan. Although it's probably Montana probably is a far more understanding state, but I I'd say either Rick or maybe Joey from Michigan. Those two would be my vote. May I just say two quick points, because I know you and John have a lot of ground to cover. But, John, if I may, Ben, this will appeal to both of you gentlemen. If you're not too far away from the old country, like your grandparents, maybe even a great-grandparent was from the old country, Ireland and Italy, I know, will give you passports if you're connected with an ancestor who is from that particular country. Now, I'm sure there's other countries that would too, but this exclusion might be cut off at some point. But it would pay to get a passport from another country, so whatever shenanigans this police state that's coming wants to create, it might be another way around it to get out of Dodge, so to speak, or at least travel in such a way that you won't be subjected to a lot of the how did Shakespeare put it, the common suffering to man, so to speak. And the last thing I'll say, gentlemen, is this. I know, John, I was curious how you and Becky were doing. You said you put yourself on a program where you wanted to, slim down. And I can recommend this. If you get one of these old-fashioned bicycles, they make them now. They look like Boulevard Cruisers, wide handlebars, plush seats, and they're one speed. But instead of walking along on a street, you can go up on a flataway and just ride the bicycle, get a nice breeze, get the sun and the wind in your hair, so to speak. But I find it's very low impact, and yet it makes it fun. And I found that I've lost like an additional 10 pounds now, and I've been keeping it off through the summer. But I just wanted to make that recommendation. It's a simple thing, but it might be something you and Becky might enjoy.
The three-wheel cargo bike is what we have on our list for, when we get to Belize.
All right. Well, nice talking to you, gentlemen.
George, very quickly, which one of the two of us is your first choice? Rich Sheben or Joey? Which one is
I'd
first,
say Joey.
second?
I'd say Joey.
Joey's number one?
Yep.
Okay. Rich is number two. Very good. George, thanks so much.
Take care.
John, I'll be right back. Captain John Ragan's with us at thefinancialstateoftheunion.com. John, I was just looking at our ranking, and we are knocking right at the door of the major league right here. Quite fascinating. We are just ahead of Dave Ramsey, ahead of some major radio stations in the country, ahead of CBS News, ahead of WINS radio, ahead of BBC radio. It's quite ahead of WTOP Washington, D.C. It's amazing that people are actually paying attention to what we're saying as, we were third from the bottom when we first started. Like everybody was doing way better than we were. We had everything to look up to because everybody was ahead of us. But that's not the case anymore. People are starting to pay attention more and more. And I want to thank all of our students for doing that. And, of course, our instructors who work so hard and volunteer their time, as you do, Captain John Ragan. Please continue.
Trust us, the gene pool is safe. We already know that genetically modified crops contaminate other fields. And in fact, the companies have sued those farmers whose crops have been contaminated because they were in possession of the intellectual property of these companies. This is a report, failed GM mosquito control experiment may have strengthened wild bugs. They released millions of these mutant mosquitoes in Brazil, and the idea is that these male mosquitoes were genetically engineered to have a dominant lethal gene so that when they mated with the wild female mosquitoes, the gene would drastically cut down the number of offspring they produced, and the few that were born would be too weak to survive long. Unfortunately, what they found out is they weren't as weak as thought, and now these genes are part of the gene pool. The mosquitoes were made from strains out of Mexico and Cuba, so now they have a mosquito that's even more robust than it was before. And the oath, and it says since 1962, and it shouldn't be too surprising. This is out on the left coast, Portland, Oregon, on Wednesday night at a soccer stadium, the National Women's Soccer League match there. They had a number of armed force enlistees take their oath there, and initially these people were, in support and clapping and all of that. But then they got down to the part of the oath where you pledge your allegiance to the President of the United States, and they started booing because these people hate Trump. Interesting thing is this version of the oath was approved in 1960. That would have been during Eisenhower's term, and went into effect in 1962, which was Kennedy. So it's been this way for nearly 60 years, but now these people don't like it because the president is Trump. Did you want to comment on either of those?
I'd like to comment on that. Yesterday, I went to there was a supermarket that had a sale on Progresso soup for $10. And Mrs. Finelli had an appointment, so while she was at her appointment, I ran into the supermarket, and the first cart that I got was sticky. The handle was sticky, the push bar. So the second one I pulled out of the line, sticky. Third one had trash in it. And so I decided that I wanted to wash my hands, like right now. So I went into a McDonald's just up the road, and I washed my hands, and I was washing my hands next to this guy about my age. And so I just did hi to him. And he got in line, and I got something to drink there. And he was sitting at a table. I said, mind if I join you? I sat down, and everything was good. And he mentioned this awful guy that we've got in the White House. I couldn't believe it. He hates him. He hates the president. But I don't think he can articulate exactly why. So I saw what you're talking about. I saw it. And everywhere in Springfield, they have these people who know nothing, who have nothing to do, who walk around in flip-flops. Who would walk around in flip-flops in the city with all this stuff that you can pick up with your feet? Who would pierce themselves and tattoos and disfigure themselves? Well, I feel a lot better now. I was able to find on the internet instructions that tell me how I can dye my hair with Kool-Aid. And the colors are really kind of nice. So many choices. What do I pick? Electric blue, bright red, light green, purple, blue, turquoise, and red tint. Now, you might need to buy several packets of Kool-Aid in order to get it right. And you might need some Vaseline, and you might to protect your scalp. And so maybe this week I'll tell you exactly how to do it, for those of you who are interested in becoming the ilk of the earth. Captain John Ragan, please continue.
I'm going to quickly do about those jobs, then we'll do the expert problem, then get back to the energy article. And when we get there, I want to bring up a point on GDP and population. Well, those jobs, and this won't hit until it's finalized with the January report, which gets published in February. It turns out that there were more than 500,000 jobs through March that weren't. So subtract that from all those fantastic employment reports you've heard. And the private reduction was 514,000 jobs. Over the last 10 years, revisions typically were in the range of plus or minus 0.2%. This revision was 50% above the absolute value 10-year average and negative. So it's a big number in the wrong direction. And, of course, nobody's talking about it but us. And
quick question, John. A quick question. in any of your professional work where you've been paid by your employer to come up with a forecast or a budget, have you ever been off that much? Because I never have been. I'd be fired, before, I don't know, 10 seconds if I was ever wrong that much. How about you?
Well, I've often apologized to Becky that, I'm sorry, I'm just not incompetent enough to make the big money.
Right. And I've had that discussion with some of our instructors. Like, how does that guy make so much money? Now, we're talking about people that they know, okay? How does that guy do so well? He's a moron. But yet he's raking in the money. And it's hard to figure it out. You're exactly right. There you go.
I think this is an important article that it has wide-ranging use, and there's a quote at the beginning of it from he was a very well-known physicist. I think he died in the 80s, Richard Feynman. Learn from science that you must doubt the experts. As a matter of fact, I can also define science another way. Science is the belief in the ignorance of experts. And global warming is one of those that you can connect to that thought. And the author of this talks about Dr. Renton, who was one of his favorite college professors. And he was saying, I have a PhD, so you must respect my opinion on all things. I got my PhD on the exfoliation of rock. That is, on how and why outside layers of rock flake off as a result of water and alternate heat and cold. But when I give my opinion on that very narrow subject, you should take my word for it. And he later confessed that even in exfoliation, he was likely out of date. Traditionally, experts miss the big picture. To get my PhD, he had to ignore things like dating, which is probably why he was still single. And he further goes, he's glad that nobody asks him about geology. If it isn't about exfoliation and they read a lot, they might know more than I do and embarrass me. And there's a bit more, but I just wanted to point out that, even people with PhDs, it's very hard to keep up even in those topics. I've come on with some of the newer research that blows away a lot of the things that we used to believe, and even that may be blown away sometime in the future. So all these climate experts, they know so little about what's going on with the sun. They just talk about the illumination, which is a very small part of what the sun is doing. They ignore what cosmic rays are doing. They ignore the fact that cosmic rays are going to continue to increase, and it's going to be some interesting times ahead.
Captain John Ragan, if you decided you wanted to get your PhD, some people refer to that as piled high and deep. How long would it take you to go from your MBA to your PhD, assuming that you have unused credits that you could apply? How long do you think? Have you thought about that?
I looked into it back when I was getting my master's in finance, and I believe the rough time frame was about 3.5 years.
On top of the master's?
On top of the master's.
Okay.
And that may not have included the dissertation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I was just wondering. Because at one time I was thinking of getting a DBA, and a doctorate in business administration. Is that what you were thinking of, or were you thinking a PhD?
I was probably going to be looking maybe a PhD in finance.
Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering what your thoughts were. Yeah, please continue.
Okay, so we'll go back to that article on energy. And in fact, this relates to my master's in finance. One of the classes was on modeling. And I decided for my first choice, I had to change it. I wanted to model GDP or forecast what GDP would be, at least in the short term. And one of the items I chose to base that forecast on was population. And sadly, the number that used to assess the correlation was 0.99, which is very, very high. And that means 99% of the change in GDP could be attributed to population. And in essence, you're just measuring the same thing. So I had to find a different model to use for the class. But that stuck with me. So when you look at GDP, most of that is based on population, which kind of makes sense. You got a new person, they've got to eat, they've got to have clothes, they've got to have a place to stay. So that makes sense. Now we've had slowing growth in population, which, amazingly, we're having problems growing our economy right now. I wonder if there's some connection there. And then you think about what's the effect when you look at this, because even though they've been tied, that's considering the normal times that we've had. Well, if the population goes up and the GDP doesn't match it, at first that means you're going to have a lowering in lifestyle. But if it deviates far from that, it impacts more than just lifestyle. It impacts the ability to live, because that's where you start increasing homelessness, hunger, and all these things that amazingly we're seeing in wonderful utopias like California, the homeless problem. And I think we're going to see that expand dramatically over the next few years. And I think that gets to tie in, too, with the number one point in the article in red. This economy is built on faith in perpetual growth. And everything, you look at all the government forecasts, whether it's the budget, whether it's Social Security and Medicare, it's all built on growth every year, and often those growth percentages are well above what is going to actually happen. And when that growth stops, which, resources, including energy, is a big part of that, that starts mucking with everything real quick. Did you want to comment on this before we move on?
If you listen to any newscast, okay, top of the hour, bottom of the hour, it's often that they refer to growth. Growth is X percentage. Growth is expected to be growth. You're absolutely right. And that this article says that you need to have the economy is built on faith in perpetual growth. Faith that rapid accelerating economic growth can and somehow will continue indefinitely, so that investments in the future will continue to make sense. That's the quote from the article. That is exactly correct. That's what people believe. Growth. And that's what makes Wall Street an investment vehicle, if you will. That people believe that if they put $1 in today, it's going to be more than $1 later. That's what they believe. And the number 2 item in red is something that my dad used to talk about. The value of fiat currency is based on faith. And my dad used to refer to it as the full faith and credit of the government. But what he did not say was the ability to tax you and inflate at the muzzle of a gun. right?
And it's like you said, it's faith and credit. I'd like to point out that cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin are only based on faith. There is no value behind them. That's not to say that blockchain technology doesn't have applications, but currency is a very bad application for it because the ledger keeps on getting longer and longer and longer. You get to the point where you can't transmit this anymore. But whereas they only have faith, the governments have faith and credit. Well, faith is believing. When you lose the faith, that's when things get bad. The other side of that is credit. Your credit can be decreased or cut off. When that happens, that will cause people to lose faith real fast, too.
Right. And the only reason a 5 is worth more than a 1 or a 20 is worth more than a 5 and a 1 is because you believe it. That's the only reason. We'll be right back. Class, hour number 2 on Friday, I'll be talking about my book. You can't buy my book. It's not for sale. It has not been published. But I'm going to talk about some of the items in the book. And this is the way I live. Things that I do, tips and tricks that I've learned over 67 years. So if you're interested in hearing some of that, that'd be Friday, hour number 2. Some of you have expressed interest in having different instruction. Well, I've taken commercials out. I've taken 6 minutes of commercials out of USA Prepares. They were my commercials. And I didn't want them, didn't need them. I'd rather have more talk time, more instruction time. So out they went. And I'm going to be talking about some tips and things that I think you might be interested in based on your expressing interest in those things. So that's Friday, hour number 2. Captain John Ragan, back to you.
And it's amazing. We still run out of time. We have 5 points left in 5 minutes. I'm going to read the points, and then we'll just discuss them until time runs out. Economic growth is dependent on ever-accelerating amounts of debt. Governments and banks are deliberately suppressing interest rates far below rates of inflation. Most citizens are now a few months' income away from bankruptcy, homelessness, and even hunger. Governments, politicians, and corporations are consciously lying about the real rates of inflation and unemployment. And our economy is totally dependent on inexpensive, affordable fossil fuel energy, water, minerals, construction materials, and other resources. And we had to worldwide go into an additional $100 trillion in debt since 2008 just for the so-called recovery that we have now. And the interest rates that are being used, we have many trillions of dollars of negative sovereign debt, which means that you give your money to the government and you get less back. And many have negative interest rates just on the face. Others, the interest rates are so low, by the time you factor in inflation, you're getting less money or less value for your money than what you put in. And if you're having to pay income taxes on it, you're even getting less after that because they say you made money. Vincent?
John, I've talked to people who have events, what we'll call them like expo type things. And they would talk about the timing, how important it was. We need to have it right at this weekend because that's when people have just received their income tax refunds. That's just after they've received it, but before they've spent it. Can you imagine basing an event on something like that? Well, it's true. That's what happens. And if you look at retail, you'll look at Black Friday. Black Friday gets pushed sooner and sooner and sooner because each store realizes that if they wait until the Black Friday traditionally, well, they will miss out because they should have gotten that money from the customers' wallets 2 weeks before. So now it's moving we're having Christmas sales now. I'm actually hearing advertisements, buy it for Christmas now. Because each business, each seller, each retailer wants your money before it's gone. That's where we are now. And there's some written material that I've read in the past about how we got here. Cheap fossil fuel. Cheap fossil fuel got us here. So if you worked in the city, the machinery was in the city, and if you look at some of the things that were manufactured in the 1920s, 1930s, you see like Brooklyn, New York. Does anybody think there's a factory in Brooklyn? Okay. Well, there were. Newark, New Jersey, places like that. Well, people started moving out of the cities because of cheap energy. They could, instead of having an apartment, they could have a little tiny lot. Well, if they went farther away, they could have a little bit bigger lot. If they went out to the suburbs, they could have a bigger lot. If they moved like we did out in the middle of nowhere, they could get a whole farm. But the whole thing was based on cheap energy. Because without cheap energy, you couldn't commute. And that's why the highways and byways are all clogged up, because of cheap energy. John, you have a comment about that?
And it's not just a matter of price. It's the energy return on investment as well. It used to be with the traditional oil, I think it was like, for 10 barrels of oil, you get 90 barrels out of the ground. Might have even been more than that, better ratio. But now with fracking and all of that, it's gone down and down. And when it doesn't even have to get to the point where it takes a barrel of oil to get a barrel of oil out. At that point you get no energy net, and even at those close rates, you end up with so little energy that the cost of that would have to be exorbitant.
Very good point. Captain John Ragan, have you seen The Walking Dead, the series?
No, I haven't.
Okay. It's recommended, class. The Walking Dead. It's available on Netflix. The first several years of it, pretty good. Now they've introduced profanity. It's not so good, but originally it was great as a lesson, way of teaching you what's going to happen.